on, Dr. Roy. How are you?
Hello, Praveen. How are you? I'm good.
Good, doing well, doing well. So, very quickly for audience, my name is Praveen Satyadev. I head the Europe business for certain industries and also a digital practice leader. So, I currently focus on digital as a domain with analytics and AI as its background. Dr. Roy, a quick intro from you would be lovely.
Yeah. My name is Dr. Chiranjeev Roy. I head the global practice for data sciences and applied artificial intelligence for Course5. Been in this field for about 20 years, solving a lot of problems, including looking at the evolution for the last 2 decades. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Dr. Roy, I think you and I have a few commonalities and few, I would say, distinguishing variabilities as well. I think the commonalities are, I think we both are passionate about bringing and introducing new ways of doing
Absolutely.
analytics. Together, we have orchestrated quite a few programs for our customers within Course5. We've worked with Fortune 100 customers where we've solved very complex programs together. But I think the distinguishing part of it is that you bring in a dimension which is unexplored in the past. And I tend to focus on what is currently innovating, what is currently interesting, what is currently trending. And I think when our two worlds meet, we often have too many questions that we get to ask
Absolutely.
each other and answer them. I think you try to take us to the future, and I try to keep ourselves in the present. I think today's
Absolutely.
topic is also very much something that has a lot of history, a very strong current relevance, and possibly big time future revelations are yet to be seen as well. So
Absolutely.
it's a very interesting topic. So today we are going to talk about customer segmentation, the
Mm.
evolution of it, and what the future stands for it in terms of the new Gen AI, LLM, and other modern intelligence science or decision science approaches that are being introduced into the market. So let me start a little bit about the conundrum that we all deal with when it comes to segmentation data in itself. Let's go to some of the
Mm.
fundamentals, right? Uh,
Mm.
Customer data versus a consumer data. It doesn't matter which industry we're talking about here. There's always a challenge in terms of acquiring, managing, processing, and segmenting customer data
Mm.
and consumer data. So if you could just quickly talk about what
Mm.
these two data types have in common or not in common, and how segmentation has been impacted with that division in principles, that would be lovely.
Great. I think you've brought in a brilliant topic today, Praveen. See, marketing has evolved throughout, right? There are two things which always have been the top of everywhere, right? You have marketing, and then is finance, right? Now, when you talk about marketing and science behind the marketing, we started about 3 to 4 decades back, right, with digital evolution, right? If you say so. Now, from digital evolution, the first, but every time when we had marketing, we had only one question: which customer to target, how to target that customer. The science which evolved in the last 4 decades, and it will continue for generations and generations to come, is actually going to be the first data science methodology, which is called customer segmentation. The art of transforming multiple data science models using the data at the back through the digital technologies into an actionable insight is customer segment, according to me. Now, let's see where we started off from. So we start off with, let's say, where we were in the search engine modes, right? And people started searching home to search. You started with Google Analytics and so on and so forth. You had a lot of digital revolution, right, from the perspective. So you started tapping into what is called as groups. In science, you call it clusters, right? You evolved from that journey. You started continuously monitoring how the behavior is changing. Yesterday, it was a need for a behavior. And today, it is experience which drives, right?
True.
So, so if the need of the consumer and the type of the consumer, we are talking about Gen Z, millennials, and so on and so forth, is changing, the technology also has to change. So what does that mean? It means our major philosophy, the people, process, and technology comes here into place. The people, right, on one hand, are the people who have a product to be given, right, which is a value today. So you're selling a value and experience, right? You have the process, which is customer segmentation, and you have a technology behind it. Most of the times, we have been trying to solve a problem only from a technology perspective. Which is the best tech? Which is the best model? Which machine learning model or which deep learning model would you be using? And then we created tons of dashboards. Okay, right? It started from a digital dashboard at one point of time because that was the need of that evolution. Today we have what I call it as a death of dashboards. It is death by dashboard that we are talking about, right?
Mm.
What does it mean? It means that we have too many things to look at to take action. And that's where the premise would start. I think that can be something that we definitely should be talking
So, Dr. Rai, just to bring in more, I would say, interesting notes to this conversation, you spoke about different aspects like people, process, technology. But the one part of the question that I had was, how do you still differentiate a customer and a consumer in the larger segmentation philosophy or principle, whatever you want to call it? Because usually how we collect this data, how do we manage this data, and how do we actually categorize this data within our systems? There used to
about.
be data warehouses, there used to be customer 360 platforms, then there were quite a few data lakes and lake houses being built by different organizations
Mm,
to collect customer data. And then now we are
mm,
in the world where we have dedicated platforms which are focusing on customer data, right? The CDPs of the world. We have customer data platforms which are managing it. But nevertheless, no matter how much we have introduced technology into the space, the divide between how you approach a customer data versus a consumer data has always been a challenge, no matter what the
absolutely.
industry is. So, how do you see that world evolving over a period of time? How has the industry embraced this customer consumer divide in terms of nomenclature, classification, data synthesis, and so on and so forth? Because every aspect of
Mm,
that process has some implication.
absolutely. Fantastic point to be taken. See, as I said, right, we started from the search engine of the world, right? We are talking about Google here, right? And then Google Analytics came into picture because we were able to find a trend. So people converted from the non-internet world to the internet world, right? In this process, right? And then throughout this last 30 years, right, since 1998 until today, right, world has changed a lot, right? And what has changed is primarily the people whom we are trying to become a consumer rather than a customer. Who is the consumer? A consumer today goes for the brand, goes for the value, goes for the experience, right? Goes for what it needs because the consumer can today has multiple channels where the customer can evolve, become a consumer. They will go for what because they have been understanding and researching about it. So there has been a very big evolution from that perspective. Data is huge. Your search engines are quite very well. You have multiple social platforms which has come into picture. So say after search came social. So that means information became widespread and open, basically. So definitely the technology also have to change. So we started from data warehouses. We had multiple tables. We used to join the tables and try to find out whom to target what, right? But then came the evolution. Okay, let's look at social media networking, social media analytics. Let's try to understand if somebody is clicking a picture, that data also needs to be utilized, right? That means I love the approaches. Or the other side of the game is I have taken this picture for for a particular product, right? And it's got it's got a defect. So people have become very vocal. People have been expressing. That needs to come out. What does it mean? Data is today not linear. Data is in a relationship, right? Because human beings have started becoming more relational. Does that do not mean that millennials and beyond prior to millennials people don't talk to each other, but it has been less. We have WhatsApp of the world. We have multiple social media channels. So information is widespread. So the data cannot be used as a general data warehouse or a data lake. That concept now has to evolve into, and that's what technology has also been evolving. We have to go ahead and use the data as a graph,
Mm.
right? Which we call it as knowledge graph today. You have to mine the entire relationship of network and try to find the causality behind
So,
why this segment has to be created. That's the first step.
So is that why then the gray area between a customer and a consumer is kind of blurring more and more because you're
Yes.
not able to see the sharp variations between how you classify them. Uh, Latching on to that, if you go to the traditional segmentation we all are very used to, the demographics
Hmm.
as a base variable or a base segmentation checklist, if you will,
Hmm.
that has also evolved. But that said, it has also not evolved. I know I'm kind of contradicting my own statement here, but still many large companies, and you and I have been working with tons of customer consumer data, and we see that they're still sticking to some of those traditional demographic classification, age, gender, location, and so on and so forth. Whereas the behavioral sciences or the behavioral intelligence or the behavioral insights world has dramatically exploded into this multidimensional, omni-channel, holistic view of looking at this data. So there is a bit of a struggle between segmenting traditionally versus taking the segmentation into some sort of a dynamic real-time AI-led solution, which can, real-time classify you into a pre-algorithmic buckets of segments and accordingly take the next best action, next best solution, and so on and so forth. So that evolution, if you can talk a little bit about how traditionally we're doing versus how we're doing it today, would be great for our audience.
Let's, as I said, right, everything evolved from the people and the process. People are the two people. One is giving something, one is taking something, right? And then the process about it, right? In a general process, right, we actually have been evolved from digital to automation. We we always took it as a game till today, right? A lot of organizations do a campaign management, right, or devise a campaign very linearly. You
Hmm.
cannot just connect a dot. It's not possible anymore. There is too much of relationship that you mind to mind, and it has nothing to do with majorly tech, because tech can only automate things. You need to evolutionize your journey in this perspective. Tech can only have been able to maximum utilize before generative artificial intelligence, have
Hmm.
only been able to understand the nuances of the journey to connect and maximum use the unstructured data, which is almost 70% or more than 80% today, as I speak, right, is about just connecting those dots and creating some basic intrinsic behaviors like sentiments, right? Understanding maybe the comments of the customer across the channels and so on and so forth. It has never gone beyond it. It might not have been tried. But however, today, the need is that if you do not mine the factors and convert it into features which are coming from this 80% of the world, you would never be able to see the actual picture. Because who is your consumer? Is he getting repeated? How many times they have been able to come to us? Does the customer see us as a brand? Right?
Hmm.
Then only they will be a consumer. A consumer is a loyalist, basically. Right? A consumer is a visionary person who is connected to your brand. One post from an individual, we talk about influencers today, right? You look at the growth in the last 3 years, right, across influencers who have tried to look at your brand. How would you do an influencer strategy which is directly related to customer segmentation? These problems have never been solved because it never
Hmm.
came,
True.
right?
True.
Now everybody is looking forward to the technology company who will go ahead and give us an automatic solution. No, that doesn't work that way, right?
But
There is
Dr.
no
Roy, so
plugins. There is no plug
yeah,
and play in this game, if I may say.
yeah. Yeah, didn't mean to interrupt you, but touched upon something very interesting. There is this myth in the market that the customer segmentation or the consumer segmentation world will move towards more automated ecosystem, where, to your point, a technology plus solution company or group of technology industry stalwarts, if you will come up with the magic wand and solve it. In the sense that the organizations no longer need to go and use their own, brain and brawn to come up with a segmentation strategy. Rather, it's going to be like a box where you feed in the data and the box is going to give you a strategy to work on. I mean, that's one part of the question. The second part of the question is that we are moving towards the world of losing the third party cookies and having more data governances, policies, rules and regulations, and regional restrictions on usage of data, especially the PI data, which means first party data strategy is going to become even more important. So connecting these two worlds between the lack of availability of other type of data sources and more, I would say, dependency on the first party data and the traditional evolution and how the segmentation methodology is now coming together. What is your take on it, and where do you think it will go from here on, keeping in mind the Gen AI thinking of the concepts? What are you seeing as trends in the market? If you could connect, I know it's a long question, but if you can connect all these dimensions, that would be lovely.
As I said, tech is the last thing that you should always think about. First, you have to define your problem, right? While defining a problem today, here comes the first thing. In consumer sciences and in marketing, you cannot use a black box methodology, because the first question comes to anybody's mind, because it's a direct customer interaction, right? Is why is this result coming, right? Why a certain segmentation is getting built up? Where is the nuance? How is this cluster model behaving? These are the questions that you would always have in the mind, and everybody would have the same question. So you cannot create a black box model. You cannot directly get a neural network to get your job done. It doesn't work that way. Automation was sustaining since or till yesterday. Today, we are in a different ball game altogether. So with the advent of the data, and data being in the form of network and relation, you have to mine the relation. You need an evolutionary data graph or an evolutionary process so that it can continuously learn. One of the
What
biggest
does it look like?
examples, right?
What does this evolutionary future state look like, in your opinion? Especially focusing on the first party data reliance, how does that look like for you in the future?
So I'll give you this example. Let's try to do it practically so that our users can very well do understand, right, in this perspective. One of the most famous applications today, we are talking about ChatGPT. How does it learn? It is called an evolutionary and reinforcement learning algorithm or an approach. In a reinforcement learning behavior, it is like a child who is getting born. You need to teach that child. The child, through your eyes, will experience the world, right? It has to go to school, high school, junior school, graduation, right? But the speed of evolution of a human being, it comparatively much more slower. I would say maybe 100 or million times slower. It will learn a lot of things on its own. It will make its mistakes, but it can generate the amount of data. In the same way, in the consumer science space, right? We would definitely have, and we always solve it for clients. We have already started doing it. Is you would start creating these relations, right? We define some of the relations, right? And then it starts learning on its own, right? You do not teach, you just teach a child to have a pudding, right? Not the entire meal. It learns on its own. That means it will get the taste of the sour, it will guess the bitterness, it will understand what is bitter versus sour. He has to experience that, and it continuously come back to you. That's called reinforcement. This is what you need to do, basically, right? That is the evolutionary data, right? You have to continuously explore along with your data set. Your speed to market will be increasing. So now, from a process and data perspective, you do not need to wait for years, right? Nor you would have to use just a black box model where you give some input and some output will come out. You already have example, which is generative artificial intelligence. It learns, right? It learns the way that it behaves. But yes, you have to be a good parent. Then you have to be a good teacher, and then you have to be a good manager for it. It will add, it will continuously, and then if you can do all of these activities, it will automatically start talking about consumers, basically, right? Today, if you and as I said, right, and it will. This point number 2 is we build thousands and thousands of models. The major part is explainability. In the explainability phase, right, this entire relationship, because it will become like a huge meteor at the end of the day, right? And the solar system of relationships and so on and so forth. You would have to utilize the other part of generative artificial intelligence, which is called LLMs, which will actually go ahead and linguistically tell you what's happening. Why is it needs to be done in a certain way, right? How is it happening, right? You can create cluster zero. I'm just giving a technical example to it. Clustering is one of the biggest techniques which are used in segmentation, correct? You have you have cluster zero, cluster one, cluster two, cluster three. Let's say you give some data, it gives out you 4 clusters, correct? And you got some algorithmic interpretations with the variables, let's say income, age, and gender, and multiple other stuff, whatever that you have. And then I'm a data scientist. I come to you, Praveen, and tell you, okay, this is your cluster. Go ahead and do whatever you want. Your first question would be, these are some junk numbers. These are some stuff numbers. And then you have to, and then I would say, okay, take this dashboard, use it, right? Then you have to sit down and figure out for the next 2 days what to do. That is the dead end. This dead end has a new horizon for you today, right? You use this information, right, to train your own large language model, which will actually convert your data sciences language, so my methodology of learning, to your way of understanding.
Makes sense.
It can tell you what to do with cluster number 0. They might be millennials looking for a cost-effective mechanism, a cost-effective product. For the cluster number 2, it might be tech-savvy consumers, right, who are looking forward to a brilliant product with a sustainable vision map. This cannot be done by a data scientist. Tech cannot solve this problem. Only language can. So that means it's a continuous evolution of these 2 parameters together.
Dr. Roy, that was a very interesting explanation as to how potentially we're moving into a very different world. If I have to put this in layman language, are we technically and process-wise moving away from segment creation or segmentation strategy, which would go look at the data, logically group the data or the audiences into, say, segment 1, 2, or 3, or persona 1, 2, and 3. From that methodology to this new way of looking at it, which will become more of a dynamic clustering. And then your engagement with those clusters are no longer based on a predetermined strategy, but rather a real-time look into the data and so on and so forth. For example, a simple example would be the content rendered for us by YouTube or content rendered by Netflix, for example. Even though they segment the viewers, as you can create some users within the platform or the app, even though they know the segment, but they look at our recent trend of content that we are viewing versus what the general group of audience in the world are viewing, and they give you some sort of a combined content recommendation to us, right? Technically speaking. Is that an example of this dynamic clustering-based segmentation? If yes or no, how is that being supported or impacted by first-party only data strategy? And then if you can connect these two worlds, that'd be interesting for us.
Good. Netflix might not have so much of data from that media world. So let's take the other social media platforms, right, in this perspective, because that may have a lot of other guidance. Organizations like Facebook and others, Instagrams, how do they make revenue? They make revenue through maximum amount of revenue through advertisements, right? For that, they need to target which kind of ads to be given and so on and so forth, right? Yesterday, your clustering was dynamic. Today, it has to be evolutionary. It has to learn through your click behavior, your continuous behavior. So what does that mean? Would only first-party data would be able to solve the problem? No, basically, right? Yes, we are also mindful about the fact that we're going ahead with we're going away with WebSockets and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of ethical concerns and responsible concerns which are coming into picture. But however, the world still does understand the value of giving my information. That organization which provides maximum value of money or value. Yesterday it was money, today is called a value and experience. would be the king, right? To do that, you cannot have an algorithm which you would be testing in every 3 months. That doesn't work. It has to be as real time as possible. Relationships are generating so much, right? In this perspective, the growth of this social media platforms has brought up multiple layers of data, and that
Mm.
needs to be consumed. So only first party data cannot be used, but can it be taken out? No. You would have to continuously create multiple layers. It's like, how would I say? I explained to my kid, right? It's like a donut of donuts, right? You keep having donuts, it will become a cake, right? But that's how it works, right? Your first donut is actually your first party data, because that's one of the first most reliable data points, right? So you need to continuously evolve and ask, is it causing a relationship? So causality is something that you have to always keep in mind, and that's where you would have to determine whether you should be trusting that data source or not, right? From that part, that is where the evolution will come.
So I'm going to ask you a trick question. Does the current segmentation approaches generally seen or witnessed in the industry? Let's not go into advanced, revolutionary, or future state technology yet. Let's stay real for today and the existing moment. Do you think it relies more on actionable insights, or it's more explainable insights? What is the output coming out of these segmentation methodologies? The second question, maybe a layer to that, is that would these segmentation principles that we currently have deployed or in the process of deploying, would they at some point pivot into this AI world, where, as I was alluding to this earlier in the conversation, would it move towards a space where we are no longer in control or have to be in control? And it's basically the models, the generative AI models or other intelligent science models that are running it, leaving the burden or taking away the burden from us. Is this possible? And if it's possible, how will it look like?
Hmm. So let me try to go one by one, right? Mathematics and statistics are considered the father and mother of the current any artificial intelligence. AI is just a system, right? Now let's talk from that language, and I'll come to your actionability part, right? A data scientist first does a exploratory data analysis on the data, right? To to be converted into what we call as descriptive insights. We used to yesterday do EDA. Today, as I said, your data has been structured into relationship. That means the EDA also has to evolve. Does the model change? No. What it
Mm.
does is it become hyperscaler. For example, so we will do exploratory data graph today. We would not do an exploratory analysis. But would the fundamentals not change? Is it going to be k-means, principal component analysis, confirmatory factor analysis? Is it going to change? No. It is going to be pivoting, right? Now comes the explainable insights problem. See, yesterday nobody was asking about, or if it, so it was a burden of the consumer, not the data scientist, to understand what gibberish numbers that I'm giving, right? Which is which is trying to understand from all these PCAs, EDAs, and all the stuff of the world, right? Including this cluster analysis, to be precise, to figure out what's happening, whom should I target, right? At the end of the day, what is cluster zero, what is cluster one? So it took a lot of time. Now with this, the time will exponentially increase, because the graph has become a meteor now, basically, right? It's
Mm.
not your subject, your first party data, you have secondary data, you have extrinsic data, you have relational data, and you have social data. Imagine the amount of layers being increasing. So imagine the amount of models will be created. That means somebody has to learn this and interpret in your language. That's where LLMs will come into picture. Generative
Mm.
artificial intelligence. One part of generative artificial intelligence is looking at the human-like language theory and understand how, in this case, would understand how a data scientist created the k-means model, understand your objective function. Let's say you are the chief marketing officer of the company, would try to interpret between both of them. We used to call it assistants yesterday. Chatbots were just programmed. Today, language evolution. Basically, that's where it will come into picture. Now, coming to your second part of the problem, a lot of things have changed. Things will be evolutionary in an evolutionary phase. We cannot predict anything today, basically. However, every technology has its own goods and bads. Generative AI will hallucinate. Human being also hallucinates, right? We give wrong answers. Otherwise, everybody would have passed in a class. No? That doesn't work that way. There is a topper. There is somebody who is struggling, right? But would you say the person who's struggling in the class could not become a CEO? It doesn't work that way, isn't it? So that means the model will also evolve. So we have to work with the model. We have to adopt and adapt to it, right? The good part here is the evolution of citizen data scientists, which was a concept yesterday, it's a reality today, basically.
So,
right?
If I can
That's
ask a trick question over here. This question from a layman to a data scientist. Let's take it that way. So correlation versus causation. What will drive segmentation in the future?
It will actually be a combination of both. We call it hybrid models. See, correlation is the degree of your relationship, right? From your objective function, whatever is your objective with that strategy, right? And its relationship with the factors that you are having. The degree and the network of the relationship between both is measured in generally two different ways. One is how much and why. That's called causation. The problem in this case is causation needs to be derived, right? It is very difficult for models, and we should not give causation to the models to explain. Of course, it can write a very good linguistic theory at the end of the day, right? But since the evolution is so much, you cannot interpret that if there are 10 factors converted to 20 variables and related to, let's say, increase in sales, right? If that is your objective function, right? And age and demographics and what type of consumer it is and so on and so forth. It tomorrow cannot suddenly wake up from the bed and tell you this is going to happen and this happened because this is what happened. You need to get into an investigation phase. However, your correlation will be very dynamic and you will get a lot of discoverable insights, because yesterday you were throwing out models which were not required because you could not explain. But today with generative artificial intelligence, it will tell you, you gave me 3 strategies, right? From explaining these variables. You know what? There are 20 more variables. You should not throw those 20 ones, right? You should evolve, because this will evolve over a period of time, right? That might not be important today, but in the market, there are people who are using this variable. You don't have it. It doesn't mean that it is not useful. The usefulness is causality. That needs to be defined by human being. As and when it learns, it will start becoming much more appropriate. Please do understand, generative artificial intelligence is generalized pre-trained transformers.
Yep.
It is meant to transform your knowledge, right, into an actionable insight. It should not take an action. Otherwise, you're just using it as a toy.
You know, I'll just quickly latch onto that as well. I was introduced to a term many years ago called data inbreeding. Basically, any organization which has embarked into the journey of collecting consumer customer data, whoever or whichever team that had set it up initially, maybe a few years ago, they would have maybe missed out on certain evolutionary aspects of collecting the right kind of data to be ready for the future. And because of which they're inbreeding into their not so effective, not so compliant, not so relevant data set over a period of time. So what is your recommendation to those organizations today who are sitting on a legacy data, very rich legacy data? Could be a combination of first party, second party, third party, but the data is slowly diminishing into being something that's irrelevant to the science that it's delivering to, number one. Number two, if somebody has to start an evolutionary segmentation strategy today, what are your recommendations? So you can combine these two questions together. What are the top 3, 4, 5 recommendations you would give to organizations in terms of embarking into this evolutionary segmentation strategy as of today?
Brilliant point, Praveen. See, as of yesterday, it was very, very people dependent. This science, behavioral science, is always about people. It's like if you have problem with the heart, you will go to a cardiologist, right? But somebody has to figure out what is the problem that you have. In the same way, in marketing sciences, there was an experienced person. I have run 5,000 campaigns in my career. I know these are the things that we used to call it heuristics, right? A heuristic approach to defining the objective. That should change today. And people are trying to change the behavior. Otherwise, the growth that Instagram would have seen in the last 10 months post GPT has come into picture has been exponential.
Hmm.
Would you have created a predictive model in last June which will predict the number of consumers that or the Instagram consumers or the Instagram, let's say, influencers who would have got generated due to this advent? Which is because why? You had multiple tools coming out, right? Which can support, you don't have to write a content with your hand.
Yep.
So it blasted that approach. Your previous models will not work. So heuristics will not work. What you need to do is you need to adapt to that nature. So you need to have a continuous wrapper on top of it. You need to utilize sciences to go beyond heuristics.
Mm-hmm. What
Heuristic
does it
is
mean,
not
Dr. Roy?
sustainable.
What does it mean? So if you have to go beyond heuristics, are you trying to say that we need to create a framework that can continuously deal with uncertainties and lack of any sort of intuitive understanding of the future, right? Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying in many words, or?
So in this case, there was a concept which was introduced about a few years back, right? I also talked about it sometimes. It's called active learning, right? Active learning is an approach in a process, right? As I said, reinforcement learning is an algorithmic approach as a process, right? Active learning, right? If you take it in a process sense, is actually divided in three aspects. First, you use heuristics to start a problem, which is called a base. You start the base with whatever you understood. Then start pulling in data. You created some models, right? You applied it. Then, while you are applying, right, your clusters will continuously keep on evolving, right? Then you go for the unsupervised approach, basically, where you would take the knowledge which is coming out and then throw it to the actual expert and verify that this is the causality, this is an explanation, basically, right? These are the new variables which are coming out. This is a new relationship which are coming out. The campaign manager is consuming it along with the data scientist has to sit down and try to not delete those aspects, right? Of course, you can stack rank and score which variables are important, right? Or which factors are more important beyond the certain factors that you have taken. So you have expanded your horizon. Heuristics plus deterministic, right? The first approach was deterministic, and then your unsupervised, right?
Mm, mm,
The final objective is the human evolution. So you created a loop in this
mm,
case, right?
mm.
Which is about the deterministic, right? The futuristic and the feedback loop in this game. This is the approach that you have to take continuously, right?
So if I
You have to go in. That's called an evolutionary process in this design. You have to change the design in your mind to accept it. This is more from a change management and acceptance problem, right? You cannot determine what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yep,
Accept the change.
that's a good point. That's a good point. So if I have to summarize, um, your recommendation to the industry is an adaptive approach, an adaptive strategy that is driven by active continuous learning,
Yep.
um, which has a core focus or an intent or a strategy which is directing towards explainability. So you're just not listening to the data and generating insights and saying, go act on it. Instead of saying that, you're able to then explain that actionability behind those insights and continuously keeping that feedback loop on, which might sound cliche to many, but not many
So
models
for
today
example,
come back.
as you said, right, Netflix, right? It gives us recommendation. You remember the first day that you started with Netflix and how we would have been evolved? They have started learning it. That means if you do not accept a certain movie that that the platform is recommending, it will never show you that movie again. Typically, that is how it needs to be. It can make mistakes, right? But it will not repeat the same thing again and again. But it will definitely show you. You need to accept that. That's called a self-learning mechanism.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
That machine learning already has, basically. But the human being is not able to adapt to it. You need to create a process for this. Tech cannot solve this problem.
So in summary, it's okay to embark on a journey to getting something right.
Yes.
But the key here is not to repeat your mistakes. It's not about taking the right things all the time. It's about not repeating the mistakes and moving from it. That's an interesting point. So if I can summarize our conversation very quickly, segmentation is definitely moving into a very dynamic ecosystem. So it's no longer traditional or a single-minded unidimensional segmentation strategy is no longer going to function because the genders are blurring, the age and demographics are blurring, the locational and regional expectations are blurring. So when all the data variables are blurring in, you have to have more of a unique real-time clustering process that is generating intelligence on a real-time basis. That's where the Gen AI, LLMs, and other modern solutions can help businesses to adapt to it. And lastly, as you rightly mentioned, there's a huge human evolution aspect as well. We all, as individuals, professionals working in this field, including us, even though we seem to be closer to this world and yet far from this world, taking the larger public into consideration, human evolution is going to be key, which means we have to teach humans to generate data, accept and process data, and also consume data. So all these three steps will have to evolve as humans as we speak. So I think segmentation is going to be an interesting spot. I think, Dr. Roy, you and I have agreed to do another session such as these to get into some more details of it. So look forward to that, and thank you for your interesting perspectives. Hope this was useful for everyone. We will talk more on this. We will build on this topic further and bring more use cases the next time. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Great talking, and I hope our audience can keep on trying, because that's how, if human evolution has happened, the tech evolution will also happen. But word of advice, tech can only enable you if you adapt.
Very good.
Because it's more important to have the people and the process in mind through the change management. It will have its own philosophies to work and work not. Ethical and responsible artificial intelligence will be grouping up, right? We would be able to do it for the right ways. But everything had a right side and the wrong side, right? But if you do not experiment, we would not be able to do it. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we'll keep on coming back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. Thank you, everyone.